Part B.3, compare, redirect, and forward. This video is for question number 14 of homework assignment number 1. All right. First, the question, in a Java web application, if you can redirect a request to a certain URL in a servlet, then you can also forward the current request to the same URL. To answer this question, we need to understand these two concepts, redirect and forward. In the previous video, we talked about the redirect, its properties. But we need to understand the forward part. First, let us look at the forward part, its main properties. Then we can do the comparison. All right. First, let's look at under what situation we use the forward method. Here, I give you two ways that we used in our examples. The first one, this one we used in project 1. In project 1, think about when we list math questions, we create a list of Java beans and store it in the request scope. Then, how do we send it to the list page, list.jsp? This is the way to do it. Because here you can see we use request dispatcher. This is an interface. This is an interface. So we use request object dot get request dispatcher method to generate this object. Here this is our resource. List.jsp is the resource we use to do the forward action next. All right, so the first step. Second step, then we store the data in this request scope. Set attribute under the attribute name prob list. We store the data in the request scope. All right. Then the third step, we forward. Dispatcher.forward request response. So in this way, we complete that forwarding action. So this is the first way in our project 1. But we have second way in our guestbook example. Here, so this is from the guestbook example. In guestbook example, we have two JSP files. All right. The first JSP called guest book login.jsp. All right. In this JSP file, there is this line. You can see JSP:forward. So what's this? JSP:forward. So we call the JSP action. So this is called a JSP action. We'll use the JSP forward action to do the forwarding. All right. Page equals, which resource we want to do the forwarding? Guestbook view.jsp. All right. But when we do this way, forwarding, so there is another thing related to this forwarding line. So that is the Java bean line. So this is also the line in guestbook login JSP page. All right, here you can see we use another JSP action, use bin action, JSP colon use bin action. Here you can see this action, we can use it to create or get a Java bin. Get a Java bin. All right, get a Java bin. Create or get, yeah, because sometimes, yeah, here, the detail, sometimes if there is no Java bin instance in the certain scope, then we need to create it. If you already have an existing Java bin instance matching the same ID, this ID is used as the reference. If you can find a Java bin in the certain scope, here the scope is request scope, with this same reference name, guest data, then you should not create a new one, just use the existing one. Just use the existing one. Yeah. So that's the meaning. So we get Java bin. If we need to create it or not depends on if it exists in the given scope or not. All right. And here for this page, we need to create. Yeah, because this is the first time we create this Java bin. So we need to create. All right. All right, so now, why I talk about that? Because these two are related. These two are related. Yeah. Why related? Yeah, we do forwarding and we store something, we store an object, Java bin here, in the request scope. Then we do forwarding. All right? Yeah, here. We store data in the request scope, then we do forwarding. Yeah. So look at the situation. Yeah. Similar, slightly different, but similar. We store something in the request scope. After that, we do forwarding. Yeah. So these two cases gives us that arrangement. Yeah. We observe that kind of arrangement. Now the summary. Yeah. Now let me do the summary, okay, on the forwarding thing. Summary here. All right. Okay. All right. First, let me provide you that, general situation description first. All right. First, we have the current component. Yeah. So when we talk about, so where we are in our current component. So I use this terminology so you can understand, what I'm talking about. So we have a current component, the current place where we start that forwarding action as the current component. So there are two cases for the current component. First, it is a servlet. All right, servlet, so this case. Second, it is a JSP. All right, okay, so that's the starting point, current component. All right, then we want to do forwarding, right? So here we want to do forward action. When we do forward action, there is one important thing we need to do before we do the forwarding. Yeah. So we need to store data in request scope. All right, so then forwarding, where to forward? Forward, there are two cases we can do forwarding. Yeah. So those two cases, I use a general terminology, a resource. Yeah. Some resource we want to do the forwarding, and this resource, there are two cases. One could be a servlet, another could be a JSP. All right, yeah. So that is the general situation description. All right, now let me put a key property. Key property, all right, yeah. The resource, so you know what I'm talking about, the resource here, to be forwarded stays in the same request scope as that of the current component. All right? Current component. So now you know what I'm talking about. Same request scope. All right. So why this property is important? Because all the components in the same request scope, they can share data in the same scope. They can share data in the same scope. All right, yeah. So here you can see the reason we do the forwarding, because later when we get to that resource part, we can retrieve data from the request scope and use it. Otherwise, you cannot, right? Otherwise, you cannot use the data stored in the request scope. All right? Yeah. So that's the key. All right. Then, with this property, then later, now let's look at our current question. Yeah. The current question, if you can redirect a request to a certain URL, redirect to a certain URL. We know when we do redirection, when we do redirect action, all right, yeah. Recall the redirect action starts at the web browser, right? User's web browser. User's web browser, okay? So this starts at user's web browser. All right. So now this forwarding case, when we do forwarding, all right, forward, yeah, forward action, okay, yeah. Forward action, yeah. So the resource to be forwarded, the resource, so this is the key part, must be in the same web application. Now, the resource must be the same web application. See the difference? Yeah. Because the resource in the same web application, then they can share the same request scope. So this second property comes from the first one. First tells you these two components, okay? Component and the resource. Resource we can also call a component, right? these two components, they share the resource, share the request scope. They share the same request scope. Okay. All right. Second, it tells you if they share the same request scope, only the components from the same web application can share the same request scope. Otherwise, how can you share the same request scope, right? Yeah. So by logic, how can you share the same request scope? All right. Yeah. So then, finally, so let me make the conclusion, the final conclusion between redirect and forward. Yeah. So here I make the conclusion. Yeah. Redirect and forward. All right. So redirect. What resource can you redirect, right? What resource can you redirect? Yeah. Because look at this. Redirect, that starts from user's web browser. So that means no restriction, right? Because you can redirect to any resource without any restriction. So no restriction. Okay, yeah, no restriction. Yeah. Forward, you can only forward to internal resource. Internal resource. Okay, internal means same web application. This is the meaning of the internal. Resource from the same web application. That's the internal. Yeah. Redirect both internal and external. Redirect both internal and external. Yeah. That's the main difference. All right. So now, with this understanding, with this background, this understanding, now you answer this question. Yeah. Now you can answer this question. All right. Yeah. So this is our comparison. Yeah. Later, so when I have more chance, so I will try to, give more explanation. Yeah. All right. So let me stop this video B.3 right here.